Good day, everyone. You are listening to the Zulu Queen from South Africa Condemns This Generation. Today, we are going to look at different subjects required when teaching the religious books, starting with history as one of the subjects required. History forms part of our lives by defining who we are as individuals, as tribes, and as nations. And if you don't know where you come from, how are you going to know where you are going? And by looking at history is one subject that is like a formula that can help us predict our future by looking at our past and our present, because we all know that history tends to repeat itself like a cycle. And looking at what is happening now in South Africa, a historian can predict our future using our past and what is happening now to tell what is coming next. If we all agree that history tends to repeat itself, that is how we should look at these past events that relates to Jesus and other chosen people, applying their lives into a real life situation on what was going on in the country and what influenced their behavior, relating it to what is happening now. We cannot teach about Jesus and the people of his time if we don't know what was going on in the country at that time to avoid misrepresentation. And what I have noticed when many people speak of Jesus, they forget that Jesus grew up colonized like us South Africans, which can make things easier to understand his life experience and what influenced his thinking and his behavior in relation to our history. We all know that Jesus fought for what was right, and for him to be condemned by the government makes me wonder, who was this man? Was Jesus a political leader or what? Only the history of the country he grew up can help us understand what was going on in his mind. I still don't understand how Jesus can be blamed by almost everyone in the country but found without sin in heaven. What is it that people of his time missed or failed to understand about him to think that he was a bad man? Let us try and apply his story in a real life situation and see where it takes us. How can everyone point a finger on one man for causing trouble for the country, unless there were certain individuals out of envy who were promoting that he was no good, with the aim of discrediting him, using their positions and power to influence the people into believing such claims, just because Jesus was becoming more popular among the people of his time. In the scriptures, we also learn of Peter cutting an enemy's ear with a sword, and Jesus stopped him. Applying what Peter did to our real life situation proves that Jesus was traveling with people who were armed and ready to fight for what they believe, which allows me to call Jesus a freedom fighter, as he was fighting for his freedom of speech in a colonized country like Mandela and his comrades. Understanding the history of South Africa and what was going on in a politician's mind, so as the people of the country fighting the apartheid government, should give us a glimpse on what was going on in Jesus' times, as we hear the very same language, because all these people were fighting for justice, nothing else. I have said it many times that to teach these Bible stories, you need to understand the culture of the people telling the story and what influenced them. So how can a white man understand how it is like to be colonized like Jesus? Because it is something they cannot relate to. And this is the reason why the West is failing to understand what is going on between Palestine and Israel, as they don't view Israel's behavior as the same as that of an apartheid government, forgetting that a Palestinian child is not free to move around in his country as he pleases, just like Jesus was controlled. If people want to apply the story of Jesus on how it was like for him growing up as a child, should go to Palestine and want to know how it feels like to live under such conditions, I am pleading with you to join hands and free Jesus in Palestine. Another subject to look at is geography and our environment. We are all influenced by our environment, so as our geographic factors. How we dress, what we eat, the color of our skin, and the way we understand God is shaped by weather conditions, so as our environment. We black people believe that God speaks to us through severe weather conditions. As we are experiencing droughts here in South Africa, our ancestors would have assigned this problem to the gods not pleased with what we are doing. God also used geography as a subject to divide the land among the 12 tribes of Israel. And many countries are still fighting on which part of the land belongs to whom till this present day. We all know of South Sudan, North Korea and South Korea, Japan and China, Iran and UAE, and many others. Again, in the book of Isaiah 18 verse 1, he speaks of the land that is beyond the rivers of Ethiopia or Cush. And Cush is the ancestor of all the black people. To identify the land Isaiah was talking about, we need the knowledge of geography. And positioning ourselves in Ethiopia or Sudan using a map and look beyond the rivers of Cush, we might be able to identify the land Isaiah was talking about. But this is everyone's challenge. Another subject to look at is genealogy, which is the study of family history and how people descend from an ancestor. It also helps us understand our evolution, meaning a change in our physical appearance due to many factors. The subject of genealogy helped me answer the question Jesus asked on Matthew 22, verse 44 to 46, which read thus. David said, "The Lord said to my Lord, sit here on my right until I put all your enemies under your feet." And Jesus asked this question to the Pharisees. David called him Lord. So how can the Messiah be David's descendant? There was no answer. Here is my answer. We all know that Jesus must come from the descendant of David. The question will be where and in which branch. My maiden name is Gumede, and my father fathered 6 children. And we all have kids, and our kids have their own kids. Assuming the prophecy says Christ will come from the Gumede's descendant, but which branch out of the 6? Jesus was trying to prove that even David did not know which branch of his family Christ will image. Just look at the Pharisees asking Jesus questions about Christ, but not one of them knew that he was Christ himself. This proves that as much as we read and understand the scriptures, but we will never believe them when applied in our real life situation. That is why I kept on asking, why waste our time and believe in these Bible stories, something we cannot apply in our real life situation? To prove that, it is Jesus who speaks of the Queen of the South appearing and accusing this generation. But why we don't want a queen living among us? And if not, where should we come from? This brings back the statement I made in the previous lecture on how can we blame the people of Jesus' time for not believing in him as Christ if we don't understand a God living among us without being noticed that he is God. Because it is clear that the Pharisees failed to see that Jesus was Christ, and people of the earth will fail again if they don't want to learn how Jesus became God on earth. This will result in us not understanding a person calling himself God or Jesus on earth, but look at him as crazy, whereas he is 100% correct. because we are all gods, and the best God will come among us because of his works, just like Jesus. But I am not on the subject of who is God yet. With the knowledge that the Jewish people became scattered all over the world for more than 2,000 years, which resulted in mixed marriages, will make it difficult to identify the bloodline of Jesus. And this is where genealogy comes in, to find the tree of David. This means that Christ can be a Chinese, can be a colored person, a white person, or a black person. Allow me to use the story of my beautiful cousin as an example. She stays in London and she is pitch black. She has 2 colored children from a white man. And let's say her generation married other white people for 6 generations. How can we trace a black ancestor? Because those kids will be white. Only genetic test can help us find the bloodline of a black ancestor. The same principle should apply in tracing the bloodline of Jesus. Not only I have this one cousin who is married to a white man, but another one who stays at Uluni with 3 kids. And assuming these kids marry other black people for 6 generations, it will be difficult to trace a white ancestor. My great-grandfather Daniel and his brother George married 2 sisters from Zanzibar who were Muslims. My great-grandfather Daniel followed a Zulu culture, and his brother George followed a culture of Islam. Till this present day, we have relatives who are half Indian staying in the Indian township, something that confused me growing up at Amlazi Township, that here is my aunt looking like an Indian, but her maiden name is Gumede like me, just because of great-grandfather George. I have many examples to give because I want this subject to be clear. Again, my great-aunt left for Mauritius with her Indian husband 8 years ago. And if we can trace her bloodline, how can we tell that we are related? I have another family friend living in China, married to a Chinese woman and with 1 child. What if the child marries other Chinese for 6 generations? How can we trace a black ancestor in a bloodline? Think of President Obama with a Kenyan father who is black and a white mother. And let's say their generation chose to marry white people for 6 generations. This means that President Obama and the First Lady will be erased from the picture as one of the ancestors, like they never existed, because the 6th generation will be all white and will think of themselves as white people with nothing to do with a black ancestor. Do you see that we are all related and we don't know who we are unless we are genetically tested? The same applies to Jesus. Not one will know where the bloodline of Jesus is. But it is clear that our ancestors have been traveling a lot and along the way changed their skin color, making us one. This resulted in Jim Wells' theory, conducting genetic tests all over the world, trying to find what he called second Adam. And we all know that Jesus is also referred to as second Adam. Wells then came with 3 countries to look at: Tanzania, Kenya, and South Africa. And here I am playing the role of Queen Sheba Jesus spoke about. Another important subject to look at is numbers or mathematics. God decided to hide his secret using numbers. And mathematics is one subject that can help us apply logic and reasoning before coming into a conclusion. When dealing with the subjects of God, it is very important to put the fear of the unknown aside and use logic and reasoning to understand how he operates. But when doing it, make sure that you do it with total submission to God, and He will reveal His secrets to you. I also understand that to teach the Bible using this new approach will be difficult for many people to erase something that have been asked to believe from childhood, whether it is a lie or not. For example, let us take a child who just learned that her parents are not her biological parents, but adoptive parents. Normally, a child will behave in a very strange manner, trying to deal with the truth and to make sense of everything that she has been asked to believe all these years. In my approach, you will be that little child. But after learning all the facts, you will know that there is no smoke without fire. And math is one of the subjects that can help us achieve that by using our logic and our reasoning. Let me give you examples from the Bible where God used numbers. Math teachers are welcome to work with me here and correct me if I am wrong. In Revelation 13 verse 18 read thus: "This calls for wisdom. Whoever is intelligent can work out or calculate the meaning of the number of the beast, because the number stands for a man's name. Its number is 666. I know many people think that 666 is a bad number, but it is a number of God. This means that work out or calculate or count to complete the puzzle. This is the reason why we give meaning behind numbers like 7 for perfect, 3 for Holy Trinity, 9 for the prayer of the dead, 12 for the governing number of God, and 6 for a man, because God created a man on the 6th day. And using mathematical language, I am allowed to deduce that 6 stands for a man. If number 6 stands for a man, will I be wrong to say 6 plus 6 plus 6 equals man plus man plus man equals 3 persons equals Holy Trinity equals God, as we all know that the Holy Trinity represents God, proving that God is not a single being, but a collective being. Look at how God played with numbers in the above verse. This verse is in Revelation 13, verse number 18, when he asked for 666. And if you add 6 plus 6 plus 6 equals 18, giving us another clue that we should not overlook number 18 as the number that stands for a man's name. And that is how I came out with our Nelson. I am sorry to call Tata by name, but I don't want to disturb my formula. Why Nelson? Because he was born on the 18th, 6 plus 6 plus 6, on the month of July, which is the month of the gods and goddesses. And we will discuss this subject when dealing with astrology. And in year 1918, and leaving out the century, we are left with 18 again. 6 plus 6 plus 6. His prison number has 46664. Is 46664, I'm sorry. It also has 666. I also want us to look at the name Nelson, as it has 6 letters. And we are told that 666 represents a man's name. Already we have a set of 3666 in Mandela. Not only it has 6 letters, but was taken from the name Son of Nel, like Son of God. And if you look at Son of Nel, and Nel plus Son is written in the reverse side. Again, the name Nelson means compassionate and a cloud. And these two names are both associated with Christ, as he is known for being compassionate, and that in the second coming, he is coming with clouds, which can mean confusion, anger, danger, or blindness. So how can this number be a bad number if one of our iconic figures is represented by the same number, knowing how good he was to us? And why it will be wrong for our Mandela, who brought so much change in the world, and not be included in the books of prophecy? Because he is black? That was one big mistake that teachers of prophecy made, to overlook Africa when it comes to the fulfillment of the second coming of Christ. And for us South Africans, we should not take for granted what our leaders did for us, sacrificing their lives for our freedom. To think that it was easy just because we now have our own wings to fly. And if people think that Mandela did not close a good deal when it comes to our economy in the first negotiations, he did not close any doors for any of us to continue where he left off. In fact, this should ring a bell that what he negotiated back then was the best thing he could get at that point in time for us to move forward as a country, as we all know that to negotiate is a give and a take process. Even Jesus said to his apostles as he was about to leave this earth, that they can do much greater things than him, proving that he was not putting a limit on himself. And the same applies to Mandela. This confirms my teachings that we are all here to play the very same role of Mandela, so as Jesus, but depends on how much greater things we can achieve here on earth to be awarded the same status. This has resulted in us South Africans fulfilling the prophecy of the children of Israel, who ended up killing Moses because he was tired of their complaints. When they were in slavery, they cried out to the Lord like us South Africans, and he saved them. And when they were out of slavery, they complained again, like us South Africans, saying the apartheid government was better off. And this is confirmed by many black South Africans supporting the very same government to make this country ungovernable. That is why Moses, a role played by our leaders, was tired, drained, and did not know what to do with the children of Israel. The same applies with our South Africans. Our government is tired and they don't know what to do with us and how to please us. And for us black South Africans, we should learn to remain in our rightful positions like David, no matter how difficult things may be. Not to be swayed in every direction like a boat. Because if we change position and divide ourselves into smaller groups, how are we going to bring that change our country deserves to help build this nation? This is the right time where we should all reflect on what Tata Mandela started and continue where he left off by fighting for this 67% of votes equals 67 minutes of Mandela Day in our coming elections, so that we can change the constitution if that's what needs to be done to benefit all the people of South Africa, our rainbow nation. We can achieve this by uniting ourselves and not allow an enemy to come between us, something we will regret, and cry out to the Lord again, singing Isono Somuntu Ubumnyama. But our sin is blindness, because we don't want to see the blessings that God has given us. Instead, we are busy complaining and pointing fingers all the time without doing nothing. Forgetting that it took us plus minus 400 years to regain this country back to us after many failed attempts. And to think that we can rebuild this country in a period of 21 years is not practical, because even Rome was not built in one day. As much as we are allowed to criticize our government, but let us show some gratitude toward them for all the work done, as a way of encouragement to continue doing well rather than discouraging them as if they are doing nothing. We need to be patient and rally behind our government by giving them all the support they need and focus on the positive while we stand united as a country. This will be the best contribution one has ever made for this country. We end our lecture for today, and next time we look at astrology and psychology as one of the subjects required when teaching the religious books. And for those who want to learn more from the Zulu Queen from South Africa Condemns This Generation, should go to Mega Books and click under Religion, or search it on Kindle Books. For now, goodbye and stay blessed.